Hello, friends, and welcome into another weekly update from our team here at North Carolina Family Policy Council. I'm Mitch alongside John and Jerry, and this is the week ending on Friday, November the 7th. As always, a lot to talk about today, gentlemen, but let's start with elections that were this past Tuesday. John, what do we need to cover as far as elections, not just here in the state of North Carolina, but around the country?
Well, of course, in North Carolina, the elections that took place were local elections for like school board, city council, mayors, county commission races, but they were kind of scattered all around the state. In some areas, like my particular precinct and districts in Wake County, I did not have elections. So there were people in the state that could vote, others that could not. But mostly, in all cases in North Carolina, just local elections. But the big news, I think, was there were several gubernatorial elections across the country and the big election for the mayor of New York City. Of course, Democratic Socialist Zoran Mamdani was victorious in that race and raises a lot of interesting questions that the voters in New York City elected a socialist as the mayor. So it's going to be interesting to see how all those policies roll out, actually how he governs, being, 34 years old and having no formal elective experience. It's just going to be an interesting future for the Big Apple.
Very interesting.
And
Jerry.
it's like always, there's always a lot of analysis, but I remember the first time people were reporting on this, they were going, we're talking about the financial center of this country, maybe even the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then somebody getting this high percentage of the votes. It's a hard thing to understand, and people are speculating what this means, what it doesn't mean as we look ahead.
There's been a myriad of speculative reports on this. Time will tell. We will see. But I'll promise, Wednesday came. It was not the end of the world. And so that there is good news there. Let's move on to what's happening here in the state of North Carolina. Some somber news to report from this past Friday. Of course, we don't always record these on Friday. In fact, rarely, if ever, do we record these on Friday. So some news that was missed last week on October the 31st, the resignation of State Representative, I believe, Guilford County, Cecil Brockman. Gentlemen, what do our listeners, our viewers need to know about this resignation that happened last Friday?
Yeah, well, he was charged with indecent liberties with a child. And immediately the legislature, as always, you're going, these are statewide officials representing their districts in the legislature, and both sides pretty quickly said, I think it's going to be in the best interest of the state and in particular the House, North Carolina House of Representatives, if he resigns. Well, that didn't happen right away, but they appointed a committee with 12 members, 6 Democrats, 6 Republicans, and as soon as that process was going to begin, Representative Brockman did announce his resignation.
Since I've been here, there have been, and I've been here right at a year, there have been either some resignations or deaths in the General Assembly. And one of the interesting things is I asked you guys early on, well, are they going to host a special election on this? Right. What's going to happen? Something that's very unique to North Carolina is the way that we put new people into office. How does that work for those that aren't?
Yeah, and honestly, Mitch, I don't know how unique it is, whether other states, I'm sure different states treat replacement candidates or subsequent candidates differently. But in North Carolina, if someone resigns from office or passes away in office, it's actually the local party of that individual who gets to select their successor. And then that successor is recommended to the governor, and the governor pretty much rubber stamps and affirms the appointment of that person to that particular office. And so if they're a Republican, then the local Republican Party, nominates an individual that is then affirmed by the governor. In this case, with Representative Brockman, it's the Democratic Party in Guilford County, and so they will select, they have not yet, but they will be selecting his replacement for that office, and then that person presumably remains in that office until the next general election. primary and/or general election. And so then it follows the normal electoral process in North Carolina. But as far as the replacement is, yes, the local party selects that replacement and recommends them to the governor, who then formally appoints them to that office.
So the resignation of Representative Brockman, a change in the building. There have been other changes we'll let you know about in just a minute. But Jerry, first, I think the bigger question is the November session that's supposed to happen. According to the adjournment resolution, there's kind of a question mark around that. Are they going to meet? Of course, I don't know that we know the answer to that, but, but can you speak to the speculation a little bit of whether or not they're going to meet here in November?
Well, according to the resolution that was passed, the original one as well as the follow-up, it's kind of a narrow opening. Basically, what they've left the door open, the language currently says when they meet, which is they've set aside a few days each month, that they can only bring up certain, and mainly says adoption of conference reports for bills where the conferees have been appointed by both houses on or before September 25th.
Wow.
So the door's pretty narrow. But as we always kind of joke about, but seriously say, if there's a will, there's a way. And so the legislature can choose to bring up other things. But at this point, it does look like, from what we're hearing, there are no plans that we're aware of for them to come back and take up anything at this stage.
But if they do, I mean, one of the things, well, six of the things, at least on the House.
Yes, correct.
On the House calendar, if they're still on the calendar, they may have been sent back to rules, I'm not sure.
Possibly.
But is veto overrides
Yes.
of a number of bills, including 3 bills dealing with diversity, equity, and inclusion, that have been passed by the General Assembly, vetoed by the governor, and are awaiting veto overrides in the House. There are 3 other bills that are awaiting veto override votes in the House, and I guess there may be one more,
The
actually.
education scholarship funding mechanism.
Yes, and so there's several pending bills that could be brought up if they do come back into session. It's interesting with Representative Brockman, with that position, that
Yes.
seat now being vacant. In order to have a veto-proof supermajority, the House has to, if everybody's present and accounted for, it requires 72 votes to override the governor.
Which is 60%.
Which is 60%. However, if a couple of members are not there, that
Right.
changes the percentages, and the threshold that has to be reached in order to override the governor's veto. So that could play into considerations of what the likelihood of them coming back in November and taking up veto override votes in addition to other matters that could be eligible.
There's a lot of math going on here, gentlemen, and my brain's just not doing the math today.
Well, just to do a little bit
Here we
bit
go
more
with
math.
a little more math.
No, but it's interesting because I think we've mentioned this before. On all of those veto overrides, in the original vote, they're on all of them except for one, there are no Democrat votes. So it would mean, as you're saying, John, there would have to be a number of Democrat members absent.
Right.
But they could arrive, have a session, and count in the room and realize, wait a minute, we've got 3/5, so we can override. On the one bill where there were Democrats who voted in favor of it was the education credit, the one that would give a credit for contributions made for scholarship funding. So that one is very much still at play whenever they're in town, because those 2 Democrats who voted for it did vote earlier this year to override vetoes. So it looks like, as you say, that's always right there as a possibility for something to happen.
But it is a very narrow margin, obviously,
Yes.
with the votes. I mean, we're talking about 1 or 2 votes, and whether or not certain members are present in the chamber when they're voting, that sort of thing. So, yeah, it's pretty much a razor-thin margin that they've got to work with. And, of course, that presumes that all the Republicans
Correct.
are there, so that they've at least have their 71 members to, work into those numbers.
The numbers. Of course, the other giant looming question mark here is the state budget. whether or not there's adoption and passage of that. That remains to be seen. So we'll keep you updated on that. I mentioned that there have been several changes in the building. One of those is House District 47 and Jared Lowry, who has gone to work for the Bureau of Indian Affairs
In D.C.
In D.C., of course, we know that's part of the Department of the Interior, and he's been replaced, as was described just a moment ago through that process, by his brother, John Lowry. So a J. Lowry on the board goes to a J. Lowry on the board, which is very interesting how that works. He is the chairman. I've heard, Chief, the chairman of the Lumbee Indian tribe down in the Lumberton area. And so that's a very interesting change and shift of things that have happened. And those two were in D.C., Jared with his job, but John also with Senator Tillis and other members of the North Carolina congressional delegation on Wednesday of this past week, John, to talk about the Lumbee Recognition Act. Tell us about S-107, and I believe it's H-474, and how they're moving through the process on the Hill in D.C.
Right. Well, the U.S. House version of the Lumbee Recognition Act was rolled into the big defense bill, before it passed the House. So that provision, the Lumbee Act, was rolled into that bill, and now that big bill resides in the Senate for action. The U.S. Senate Committee on Indian Affairs on Wednesday held a hearing on the Lumbee Recognition Act, which Senator Tillis was a primary sponsor of, and had John Lowry, who you just mentioned, who is now a member of the North Carolina House of Representatives and also serves as the chairman of the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina, testified in committee in support of the passage of the Lumbee Recognition Act. And so there was a lot of discussion and debate and consideration of that. Interestingly, but not as a surprise, Michelle Hicks, who is the chief of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, also testified in that committee hearing in Washington in opposition to the Lumbee Recognition Act, which has been a longstanding position of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians with respect to the full federal recognition of the Lumbee tribe in North Carolina. Now, the Lumbee tribe was recognized by Congress through an act of Congress back in 1956.
Yes.
But at that time, Congress did not go to the full degree of granting full federal recognition for the Lumbee Indian tribe, which would include access to federal funds for things like housing, education, health care, disaster relief, and things of that nature. And the speculation or estimates that I have heard most recently are that the tribe would be eligible for probably $500 million
a lot of money
in funding for those types of services. The other thing that is inherent with full federal recognition,
here's the kicker,
is the right for those Indian tribes that have full federal recognition to pursue gambling operations in the states in which they're located and have tribal lands. And so our concern on this bill, which we communicated very clearly to our congressional delegation at the beginning of this year, as we have for many, many years, is that we don't have opposition to the Lumbee tribe gaining full federal recognition through an act of Congress. We do have opposition and concerns about the inherent right that the tribe would have to engage and pursue gambling operations in the state. So our explicit request to our congressional delegation is that should legislation move forward in Congress to grant the tribe full recognition, is that they also adopt language expressly prohibiting the tribe in that act from being able to pursue gambling operations in North Carolina. And in fact, that language has been included in prior versions of the Lumbee Recognition Act dating back to like 2007, when we first worked with former Congressman Walter Jones to amend the Lumbee Recognition Act, again, to expressly prohibit the tribe from having gambling should they be granted full federal recognition by Congress.
Well, just to reiterate the point, North Carolina family does not stand in opposition to full federal recognition. The concern, again, is what's happened over and over and over again, as these tribes have been granted this full recognition, and that is the proliferation of predatory gambling across
And all the negative effects of that.
across
yes.
the country, and the negative effects, disastrous effects that has not just on the nuclear family, but the lives of human beings, your neighbors. So I think that's certainly something worth noting as we look at the potential of this granting by Congress.
And it's always problematic just because what it's going to do to the citizens of the state. But in this case, we're talking about Interstate 95.
Yes.
Major thoroughfare, major access for a lot of the state, people who live here as well as people coming through. And
Yeah.
it's just, I have to bring up though, John, because I always remember the story. And this is to thank you all for working together with us. You never know when you're going to have an opportunity to interact with somebody, especially your elected official, that may have an impact on the outcome of legislation. And this amendment that John's talking about, I remember years ago, he had gone across the street where at that point there was a grocery store.
Well, that morning, actually, I had been on the phone with the office of Congressman Walter Jones because we determined when the Lumbee Act was moving through the House that it was going to come before the House Committee on Indian Affairs. And Walter Jones happened to be a member of that committee. And so we were going to reach out to him and ask him if he would consider offering an amendment to expressly prohibit the tribe from having a right to gambling should that bill move forward. So this particular day, I had been on the phone with his office up in D.C. and had sent them a bunch of information and had kind of done everything that I could do. And then about lunchtime, I was like, I'm going to go across the street to the Kroger grocery store that used to be across the street from our office and get some lunch. And lo and behold, I walk in the door at the Kroger and turn and look at the checkout stand, and there was Congressman Walter Jones buying a 50-pound bag of dog food. Why he was in Raleigh, why he was buying, well, I know why he was buying dog food, but why he was at that Kroger, I don't know. But we had a 15-minute conversation in the checkout line at the Kroger. He committed to offering that amendment to the bill. And actually did offer the amendment. The amendment was adopted. The tribal leadership consented and agreed to it because they didn't want gambling standing in the way of them receiving all of the other benefits that come with federal recognition. And that language, Jerry, actually became boilerplate or a standard part of the Lumbee Recognition Act for many, many years in Congress as they considered that legislation. To date, it has not passed. We don't know, what the outlook is for this legislative session, but we're going to be tracking it very closely. Sorry to grab that from you.
I was just going to joke and say, for all of you out there who say, well, that's going to take an act of Congress, apparently that can happen over a bag of puppy chow at the grocery store across the street.
And it's also to encourage you. Most of our face-to-face lobbying or encouragement of elected officials is here in Raleigh.
Yeah.
And here,
again,
you say, hey, God brought him to the grocery store across the street. He lives in eastern North Carolina. All that to say, if you see your elected officials in the grocery store or
Be nice to
somewhere
them.
in your everyday life, one, it's always good to thank them for their service. And then if you know of something that they're going to be considering,
take advantage of the opportunity and talk to them about
do it.
Yes.
As I'm sure John did. He spoke the truth in love, and it was gracious. Yeah. So thank you all for being part of what we do.
Well, and I would also say thank you for enabling us and equipping us to be able to serve in this role, because we have the privilege of, with a lot of our elected officials, having personal relationships with them that we've developed over years, and in some cases, Jerry, decades. But you all enable us, your support enables us to be down on the front lines at the state legislature, talking with members of our congressional delegation, and representing the cause of Christ and biblical values in our public policy and political arena. And so we're grateful for that.
Well, to put a bow on this segment of the update video, as someone who's traveled 95 multiple times in the last year, the last thing the state of North Carolina needs when there's a Buc-ee's just south and then the south of the border experience that is a casino right there on the 95 corridor. Yeah. Not a good idea.
Nope.
One last thing before we close out the video, and that is coming up this coming Thursday, November the 13th. I'm excited. It's a really cool venue. It's the Millennium Center in downtown Winston-Salem. And John, our speaker is Dr. Farr Curlin. Tell us what he's going to be talking about and why you need to be at the dinner this coming Thursday night.
Well, Dr. Curlin is actually a palliative care physician at Duke University. He also works in medical ethics and with the seminary at Duke, is a dear personal friend of mine. We've been to Guatemala together on a number of trips, but he is an expert on medical ethics, especially in the arenas of life and gender issues, and just has a fascinating level of experience, an in-depth level of experience, both personal and professionally in these arenas, and will be sharing a lot about the status, the state of our nation and the state of our state with respect to a lot of these issues, and a lot of the conflict that exists within the medical community regarding, the value and dignity of life, the value and dignity of God's creation, how he created everyone as male or female, and what that really means. And so it's going to be a wonderful, insightful, and fascinating time, and we're certainly looking forward to it.
Very good.
Final note on that too, John. It says a lot about, obviously, hearing about who he is, what he does. God's given him an amazing mind, but his heart as well,
Yeah.
that you all have been involved in missions together.
Yes, yeah.
And you think with all that he's doing and practicing medicine and heading up this.
He's not busy at all.
Duke Hospital and the Duke Divinity, and he's on mission trips
Yeah.
together with you.
How cool is that?
Well, and one neat thing I'll just share, just a little insight about the mission trip, is that Farr is a medical doctor, but he would hold medical clinics in Guatemala and just see people who were having medical issues. Far more often than not, what he found is that it really was an emotional and spiritual issue that they were having, because he would talk to them.
Yeah.
Of course, he's fluent in Spanish, but would talk to them, and they would say they have a
Superhero.
backache or they have a stomach, a virus or ache or whatever. And the more that Farr would talk with them, the more that he would recognize and identify that these were symptoms of something more fundamental. And so he would seek opportunities to pray with them, to talk to them, to counsel them, and also to prescribe to them medicine, but the most important medicine
Yeah,
was spiritual medicine. So, just knowing him from that perspective, but also knowing just his professional credentials, we're going to have a really, really interesting and great evening on Thursday, November the 13th.
Dr. Farr
So
Kerwin,
please come.
Millennium Center. There's a link in this email or at the bottom of this video, or you can call our office, talk to Heather, find out how you can be a part of this incredible event that's going to be happening this Thursday. And I'm excited. The Millennium Center is just a cool spot, by the way. You're going to want to be there for that. Gentlemen, what a great video. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sticking with us during this video today. Of course, you can always count on us to bring you the information that you need in these videos, and we will stay up to date on what's happening, not just around the country, but more importantly, right here in the state of North Carolina. Thank you for all that you do to make what we do here at North Carolina Family possible. And on behalf of these gentlemen and the rest of our team, we wish you a great Friday. God bless you, and thank you for what you do.